When you first start your flight training, you're going to notice something really weird right away, and if you aren't prepared for it, this could cause you to get uncoordinated during critical phases of flight. That's why an important part of ground training is learning about the left turning tendencies that can occur when you fly an airplane. Welcome to Free Pilot Training, I'm Josh, and today we're talking about the left turning tendencies. Now, probably the first place you're going to notice this is during a takeoff. And that's because left turning tendencies are most powerful at high angles of attack, high power settings, and low airspeeds. Basically, anytime you're trying to climb away from the ground. And I'm just going to warn you right now, if you aren't paying attention, these left turning tendencies are going to cause your airplane to yaw to the left, which is going to activate the rudder alert sitting in your right seat. What are you doing? Give me some right rudder. Step on that ball. And your instructor might be a little bit annoying about this, but there's actually a really good reason for him pointing this out to you. First of all, when you're climbing at a high angle of attack, we're closer to our critical angle of attack, and this means that we're already kind of close to stall speed. So if we stall, being uncoordinated is a recipe for a spin. So your instructor isn't just being a douchebag, he just doesn't want you to die. So when you're flying at a high angle of attack, a high power setting, and a low airspeed, I want you to really pay attention to what your inclinometer is doing, because you're probably going to need to use right rudder to keep your airplane from turning to the left on you. Okay, let's go ahead and look at why these airplanes have left turning tendencies. And the first reason is because of a torque reaction from the engine and the propeller. To understand torque reaction, you first need to understand Sir Isaac Newton's third law of physics. This is the one that states that for every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction. This means that when the engine and propeller turn to produce thrust, an equal and opposite force try to roll the airplane in the opposite direction. In most airplanes, the propeller turns clockwise as viewed from the cockpit. This means that an equal and opposite reaction would cause the airplane to roll to the left. That's why torque reaction causes a left turning tendency. By the way, did you know that your propeller's main purpose is to keep the pilot cool? Yeah, it's a fact because pilots really start to sweat anytime the propeller stops turning. I'm sorry, that's one of my favorite jokes. But anyway, something else you need to remember about torque reaction is that the more power you put in, the stronger your equal and opposite reaction is going to be. So at high power settings and in airplanes with a lot of power, torque reaction can be really strong. Now, airplane manufacturers aren't stupid. They know that torque reaction can be kind of annoying, so most airplanes are actually designed to minimize the effects of torque reaction, especially during cruise. Older airplanes are often designed so that the left wing will create just a tiny bit more lift than the right wing during high-speed cruise. And this just keeps the airplane from trying to roll to the left on you during level flight. But during slower airspeeds and high power settings, torque reaction is still going to cause the airplane to roll to the left on you a little bit. On newer airplanes, they often offset the engine to the right a little bit. This is another way to keep the airplane from yawing to the left on you during cruise, but it still doesn't completely eliminate torque reaction during slow airspeeds and high power settings. The next left turning tendency that you need to know about is something called P-factor. And no, P-factor has nothing to do with the energy drink you chugged an hour ago. P-factor can be a little bit confusing for some people, but it's really not that complicated. If you look closely at the cross-section of a propeller, what you'll notice is that they're basically tiny little wings that spin around the engine really fast. And instead of producing lift that goes straight up, they produce lift that pushes the airplane forward. This is what we call thrust. Now, once again, most propellers here in the US rotate clockwise as viewed by the pilot. This means that when the propeller is on the right, it's moving down, and when it's on the left, it's moving up. During straight and level flight, the upward moving propeller and the downward moving propeller produce the same amount of thrust, but anytime you pitch up or down, this changes the angle of attack on these propeller blades. This means that anytime you pitch the nose of the airplane up, the propeller on the right will be at a higher angle of attack, while the propeller on the left will be at a lower angle of attack. Because of this, the right side of the propeller will actually produce a little bit more thrust than the left side. This in turn causes the airplane to yaw left when the nose of your airplane is pitched up. I like to tell people that in a nose-high attitude, that right blade is taking a bigger bite of air, and that's what causes your airplane to yaw to the left during high angles of attack. The higher your nose is, the more bite that propeller has, and the more power you put in, the more power that blade has as well. Because of this, P-factor is greatest at high angles of attack, high power settings, and low air speeds. Now, airplane manufacturers know about this problem as well, and they design airplanes with something called a rudder tab to help with this issue. Now, some airplanes actually have rudder trim that can be fully adjusted in flight, but smaller training planes typically just have a thin piece of metal that deflects your rudder to the right to help with some of that left yaw that's caused by P factor. And once again, it helps, but it doesn't eliminate it. Next, we have the corkscrew effect, and the corkscrew effect is strongest when the propeller is moving really, really fast and the airplane is moving really, really slow. As the propeller spins to produce thrust, some of that air spirals around the aircraft. This is what we call the spiraling slipstream, and as air corkscrews around the airplane, some of that makes its way over and smacks the left side of the vertical fin. This in turn pushes the tail right, which causes the airplane to, once again, yaw left. Now, this spiraling air does kind of try to roll your airplane to the right as well, but this is completely negated by torque reaction, which is why most airplane engines turn this direction. This allows the corkscrew effect to help offset the torque reaction. Now, it's important to note that as airspeed increases, the spiraling slipstream also gets longer, and at some point, the slipstream no longer hits the tail. This is why the corkscrew effect isn't really a big deal during cruise. It's mainly only a problem at slow airspeeds and high power settings. Okay, when it comes to left turning tendencies, there's one more thing I want to talk about. A lot of people don't count it as a left turning tendency, but it can be a left turning tendency in some airplanes. And this is something called gyroscopic precession. When the propeller on your aircraft turns, it acts a lot like a gyroscope. And this is important because when an outside force acts on a gyroscope, the gyroscope is then subject to a resultant force known as precession. Now, some of you guys are staring at this video like a calf staring at a new gate. But all this means is that if something bumps a gyroscope when it's turning around its circle, the gyroscope will move in a certain direction. And the direction that it moves is 90 degrees ahead of the applied force. This simply means that if my propeller is turning clockwise and I yaw my airplane to the right, my nose will want to pitch down because down is 90 degrees in front of the force I applied. And I know what you're thinking. This isn't really a left turning tendency. No, it's not. But what do you think would happen if we pitched the nose of the airplane down? Yeah, 90 degrees ahead of that is left, which is a left turning tendency. And this isn't a big deal in a tricycle gear airplane because when we take off, we typically pitch the nose of the airplane up. And in this case, gyroscopic precession helps eliminate some of those other left turning tendencies for a second. But on a tailwheel aircraft, you actually have to pitch down first on takeoff to get the tail flying. And in this case, gyroscopic precession can increase those left turning tendencies quite a bit. And that's one of the reasons why tailwheel pilots get so good at using the rudder pedals. They're constantly accounting for this and other stuff during the takeoff roll. So let's do a quick review. The three main left turning tendencies that you need to know about are torque effect, P factor, and the corkscrew effect. And if you're flying a tail dragger, gyroscopic precession can also cause left turning tendency as well. But in most airplane, it actually helps us to counteract those other left turning tendencies. In addition to this, you'll also need to remember that these left turning tendencies are typically the strongest at high angles of attack, high power settings, and low airspeed. And this is why they're going to be most noticeable on takeoff. So don't let that rudder alert bark at you. Keep that ball centered without any input from your instructor, and you'll be light years ahead of all those other student pilots out there. Hey, thank you for liking this video. Wait, you did like it, didn't you? Go ahead and do that if you haven't, and be sure to check out freepilottraining.net if you need a ground course that'll endorse you for the written exam. That's only $50 over there, and I guarantee you, you won't be disappointed. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you.